All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to York River Cannabis. Today is our first live stream. If you don't catch today's live stream, it will be on video later today. So today's topic is we're going to talk about the USDA hemp laws, what I've learned so far. And today's kind of probably going to be the last time I talk about the USDA hemp laws in my interpretation. From here on out, if I hear anything that's groundbreaking, I'll let you guys know. But from here on out, I'm probably not going to address the USDA hemp laws until I hear more information based off of like state regulations and stuff like that. So let's get started. I see a couple people in the chat. That's great. So I'm going to start off with talking about last week's live stream with the cannabis lawyer. So Cannabis Legalization News, if you guys haven't checked them out yet, go ahead and check them out. They're a really good YouTube channel for anybody who deals with cannabis. And their take on it was that the USDA hemp laws are final. They're done. That's what you got to work under. That's not necessarily the case from my understanding, but they're looking at it from a business perspective. If you're a business and you're getting into hemp, you definitely are going to have a very legal hard time navigating the legal stuff. And I think they're looking at it as, hey, if you're starting a cannabis business, you need to be aware of all these USDA laws. That's true. And I do know that we did touch on like the different state laws, and that's really what I'm going to hit today. If you haven't checked out, the USDA finally did drop a webinar with a lot of their rules and regulations. And I will leave that link in the description. In fact, I might be able to post it in the chat here. Give me a second. If you guys haven't checked that out yet, I will post that in the chat. See if you can check that out later, and I'll put it in the video description. And in that chat, in that webinar, they actually contradict themselves. So they talk about that states need to have a system where they talk about you need to test for Delta-9 THC. And then later in the webinar, they talk about you need to be compliant with total THC under 0.5, or if you're over 0.5, you're no longer considered negligent. So they contradict themselves in their own webinar, which is just bizarre. And that's my interpretation. Now, this week, I heard from a criminal lawyer, so not a cannabis business lawyer, but a criminal lawyer. And their interpretation was, oh, no, you can still do business. The code in the United States law is that hemp has been removed from Schedule 1 by the 2018 Farm Bill, and that you can go about business as usual. And I think that's a great stance if you're in a court case, but I really don't think anybody who's farming this stuff wants to be there. So you don't want to be talking to a criminal lawyer about how to get out of jail. You want to be talking to somebody who's going to keep you from going to jail. And I think that was the Cannabis Legalization News' point of view. And the lawyer I talked to later in the week was how to get you out of trouble. You don't want to be in trouble. So the way I'm looking at this and the way I've interpreted these two lawyers and how they've talked about it is, if your state was underneath the 2014 Farm Bill, you are okay until November 2020. And the 2014, along with the 2018 Farm Bills, say Delta-9 THC. That's it. That's the law. Now, the USDA laws are in effect for commerce. So they're talking about transportation to states that do not have or have not adapted any type of hemp law. So I think there's only 3 states, and I believe it's South Dakota, Idaho, and Mississippi. So if you're not in one of those 3 states, you need to go check out your state agricultural plan for industrial hemp, and that will tell you what's going on. Now, Virginia has kind of contradicted themselves also, where they said it was total THC, but in their own law, it is Delta-9. So they actually don't know what they're talking about either. And that's what the criminal lawyer said that we talked to on Thursday, was that Virginia still is a Delta-9 state. We did have a 2014 Farm Bill research project. So we technically are under the November 2020 guideline, and most states are. Now, when you do make a product, so if you're a hemp farmer and you're selling your flower, you definitely want to be careful about where you're sending it. If you're just doing in-state travel, you should be okay with your industrial hemp permit. Like here in Virginia, they give you 2 permits, one to keep on your wallet and then one to keep at the farm. If you're traveling with hemp in Virginia, you're probably going to be fine. It's when you go out of state. If you go to Maryland, they may not recognize Virginia's agricultural plan. And when you start traveling out of state, you technically are now going to start falling under the USDA hemp laws, because that's what that hemp law is covering. It's covering the transportation of that hemp. And they even say that in their webinar. You can't prohibit the transportation of the hemp, but it has to meet those standards, which 90% of hemp farmers are not meeting that standard currently. So that's really a gray area. Now, you can still buy CBD online, and most products other than hemp flower are going to fall under that USDA guideline of 0.3 THC for a total. It's where you're with the flowers where you really get into a lot of gray area. And my take on it is, if you don't want to go to jail, don't ship your flower out of the state that you're growing it in unless you know that that state is 100% compliant, because you can find yourself in some really hot water. Just the other day, transportation got seized in New York City of hemp, and that guy is going through all kinds of ridiculous legal stuff now. And that was grown legally in Vermont, transported to New York. Now we're going to see if that court in New York goes through the USDA guidelines or if they're going to go through New York's state guidelines. So that'll be an interesting case to watch. And it was all legally grown hemp in Vermont. So check that out. You could probably just Google hemp seizure in New York City and you will see that case. The other one is that big one out in Idaho, where it was seized in Idaho and it's still under seizure to this day. And I think the USDA law would prevent that from happening. So that would be unconstitutional and it would be illegal to seize the hemp. Now, if it didn't qualify as the hemp in the USDA law, well, then you're in a different world. And because the testing is so bad right now, I wouldn't trust that a state police officer takes a sample, brings it to a forensics lab, and then all of a sudden it comes in hot when you have a COA that says it's not hot. It's just gonna be too much back and forth legality wise. My advice is stay in state, be familiar with your state policies. And if you're gonna ship stuff out of state, I wouldn't ship flour. Just do the oils, the tinctures, the balms, the lotions. That is probably really, really safe. You definitely should have it tested anyway, but that should be really safe. Most of my stuff is testing well below the 0.3 total, just because when you're making that oil, you're mixing, you're also losing a lot too. So you're not going to have all that stuff in there. Yeah, I wouldn't trust anything a state trooper does either. And you can see that the problem with the one in Virginia, the case that was here in Virginia, the officer did not believe that the person purchased the CBD flower legally. And they went to court and they won, of course, but you don't want to find yourself in court. And I think the most of the problems are coming from the hemp flower itself. If you are caught with hemp flower, you could be in trouble. If you're caught with CBD oil, most of the time they're going to let you go. I haven't heard of any serious cases other than that one in Florida. That lady at Disney World or something got caught with it and she got off. But for the most part, I haven't heard of any CBD oil busts because most officers aren't going to deal with that. But if you have hemp flower, if you get one that really does not like marijuana or the hemp or anything like that, you are going to find yourself in trouble and you're going to find yourself probably going through some legal stuff. So just be on your toes with the flower stuff. That's my take on it. The criminal lawyers will tell you they can get you out of it. And I haven't heard of a case that hasn't been overturned. Not yet anyways. I know that one in Idaho is really back and forth, but The one here in Virginia flipped for the person. The one in Florida with the CBD oil flipped. And I would assume that the one in New York is going to flip. They're already saying that, oops, it was hemp. So we'll watch and see how that one plays out. But that's going to be the real determining factor of enforcement. So I'm really watching that as that develops, because now that the USDA laws are in effect, it's going to be interesting to see how the state enforces the laws, because that is, interstate travel. So does that fall under USDA, or is New York going to follow their 2014 Farm Bill regulations? The other thing that I find interesting is that in that webinar, they only mentioned the 2018 Farm Bill as descheduling the hemp plant. All the hemp, research stuff was in the 2014 Farm Bill, which I thought was really interesting. They really don't talk about the 2018 Farm Bill a lot. They got to go back and forth about what the USDA hemp laws are going to do, and if you're in a 2014 state, what you can do. And they only mentioned the 2018 Farm Bill for the descheduling stuff and a couple other small things, but they really do hone in on that 2014 stuff, which is really bizarre because the 2018 Farm Bill should supersede the 2014. Another thing is the labs. So we did talk to a person who owned a lab, and they're coming from a perspective of this whole DEA registered thing. That's a real thing. So there's only a handful of DEA registered labs in the country. So I don't know what they anticipate for 2020, but if every farmer who's farming this year does it in 2020, the labs will be so overwhelmed, there was no possible way they are going to get those lab tests done, especially within that 15-day time frame that they're giving you to harvest. You don't know what your CBD is at. Why would you start harvesting if they're not coming back and say it's hot, you got to destroy it? Why would you go through all that effort of harvesting? I mean, everybody who's grown this plant this year knows how much work the harvest is. So you're probably going to wait for that test. So 15 days is probably not even realistic. It's probably going to be, if they were on the ball, considering they take the sample, you got to allot for a few days to even get the sample there. You're talking probably only a week of harvest by the time you find out if it's legal or not. But it doesn't mean that you can't have it privately tested. Now, their take on it was, if you send them a sample, they're not obligated to tell the DEA. They're not obligated to, if it comes in hot, they don't have to do anything to oust you, which I thought was really nice. They just test it. They give you the results. They dispose of the thing, and that's it. But if they really shift to this more government oversight lab, I think you're going to see a huge backup there too. So that's something to look out for. And her take on it was, that's one of the big pushback things. And as a lab person, she's also saying that Delta 9 isn't hard at 0.3. So she was talking to some other labs, and now I want to get kind of into the advocating what you can do. And I'm trying to form a letter to the USDA before I just tell you to go and submit something. But what they're saying is, say you want to give them something. So give them the 0.3 Delta 9. That's not unachievable with hemp. All my plants were under the 0.1 or 0.3. What they're saying is, bring the total to 0.9 or 1%, keep the Delta 9 where it is, and give the farmer the 0.3 Delta 9 and the 1% total. And that's something a farmer can actually work with. And I really like that idea, because you're not telling the USDA, oh, your entire law sucks. You're saying, no, your 0.3 is okay, but your total is unworkable. And I think if you approach it in that aspect, you may get some ground with the USDA. The other thing is that they said is, with the 15-day harvest time, that's just unachievable for a lot of farmers. They don't take into account inclement weather. In fact, I think it even says in the regulations, it doesn't matter. You have 15 days. You can pay for a retest if you're not going to make it. And that retest has to be with the government lab. So you have to go in and pay for them to test it again so you can extend your harvest, which every farmer is going to be put in that corner, which is not fair to the farmer there either. The other thing that we need to push back on, I think, is how you go about the total THC. I think if people are coming in at 2%, 3%, I don't think they're going to listen to us. I really think we need to hone in at 0.9 or 1% and leave the Delta 9 at 0.3. That's something we could definitely work with the USDA. Now, the other thing the lab addressed, which I thought was interesting, is even if you grow fiber hemp, they're still going to have to come out and test it. So even if some of the farmers switch over to fiber, you still have to harvest that fiber within the 15 days, which I find is absolutely ridiculous. They're not giving any leeway with this plant, and they're giving no leeway to the farmer whatsoever when it comes to growing this plant. It's like saying to a tomato farmer, you got 15 days to harvest your tomatoes. We don't care about your green ones. You got to go and get the red ones. And then that's it. You have to pay again to go harvest those green ones when they turn red. Because the way I harvested this year, the way a lot of farmers I heard harvested this year, was they priority harvested, right? You take your colas and then you wait for the middle of that plant to mature. You take the middle and then eventually you take the bottom. And you're getting a hell of a lot more yield with that than you would be if you just had that 1 15-day harvest. For a lot of the small farmers, that priority harvesting could mean the difference of $10,000 to $15,000 if you have a decent acreage. So that's a real problem, because if you're going to have to continuously pay for more government testing, that's ridiculous. So that's something that definitely needs to be advocated for. That them giving you a time frame on harvesting is just, I want to say it's borderline unconstitutional. I really don't think the government should be telling you how long you have to do something. That's just insane. So that's kind of my take on everything. The webinar is just as confusing as their laws. They contradict themselves, and I really encourage everybody to kind of look at that at the end of the video and kind of see what I'm talking about there, where they talk about Delta 9, then they go over to the total THC. So they really don't know what they're talking about. Now, off the law subject, I talked to another hemp farmer here in Virginia who has a connection to our Virginia senators, both Mark Warner and Tim Kaine. So this is kind of related towards Virginia, but as a whole, DC. So he talked to the AG policy guys for both senators, both Kaine and Warner. And the cool thing was that Kaine was actually at a hemp farm like a couple of weeks prior to this whole thing coming out. So Kaine is actually well-versed in this whole hemp thing, or at least he knows about it. So they were kind of surprised that people had this huge pushback on the USDA. They had no idea what had just dropped. So they were also caught off by surprise. And what they said was, well, you definitely need to let us know what's going on. So we are going to talk to them again at some point. Might even get some farmers up to DC to talk to either the AG policy guys or both the senators and the AG policy guys. Because if it's going to be a law, you want your senators to be on board with it. And their take was, of course, you need to push back, but I think a single voice of many farmers is better than a whole bunch of farmers just yelling and bitching at the USDA. They're not going to listen to that. But they also said to contact the USDA. So they did, and the USDA was very open to public comment. So I don't think it's all over. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think the USDA is definitely listening, and I think they wanted to put a clamp down on some of this whole manipulating of the THC of the hemp plant. And I've seen it, guys. I know what they were talking about. You can definitely control your Delta 9 to 0.1, and you can have a THCA of in the 20s percent-wise. That's marijuana. People were definitely getting around it. Now, I'm not saying I don't want legalization, but when people were manipulating those laws, I think the USDA clamped down, and that's why you see the clamp on the total THC, not the Delta 9. I think they found out that they kind of screwed up in the Farm Bill. They came out with these laws. Now, again, it goes back to the lawyer real quick before I go on. The lawyer in Virginia says, U.S. code says Delta 9, so that's what you need to follow. And I think you will be safe if you end up in court, but you don't want to end up there. Trust me, you definitely do not want to end up down there. So that's what I have for the policy stuff. Now, as far as pushback goes, again, like I said, single voice, many farmers, not a whole bunch of farmers. They're not going to listen to everybody with, all different opinions. You definitely need to advocate what's right for you, but coming out with a single form of pushback, I think is going to be the most constructive thing for the USDA. They're definitely going to listen. They're definitely going to take it into account, and they can adjust before 2020. They can go back in. These are just interim draft rules. So if they find something to be absolutely ridiculous, they can definitely go back in and change it. There's nothing saying they can't change it. So if we push back, we have until December 30th. So I've seen some people like, only 300 people have responded. That's okay. You're going to see a large push probably towards the end as people start, getting momentum and getting these forms and having that single voice. I think everybody's kind of on the same page with the 15-day harvest, the 0.3 Delta 9, and the 1% total THC. I think that's really the biggest push. I don't know if you're going to be able to argue cost of, the permits or anything like that. And at a state level, there's not a whole lot you can do because your state has to put in a plan to grow hemp. And most states, unless you're like Texas, who doesn't like the federal government very much, are going to pretty much fall in line with the USDA. They're not going to try to buck that trend because it's probably going to cause a lot of headaches for them, but it's also going to cause a lot of headaches for the farmer because even if Virginia passes a 1% total THC and a 0.3 Delta 9, that's only for Virginia. So if we wanted to go down to North Carolina and sell our stuff, you probably couldn't do it if North Carolina falls in line with the USDA plan. So working with your state legislators is good, but you're really going to want to focus on the DC side of things because the states are still trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do. So with that, guys, does anybody have questions about some stuff? I know that a few people have talked to me. I can't give legal advice. I'm just going from what I can do and what I'm doing as a farmer, but I really don't have legal advice. Just try to stay out of jail, guys, while everybody tries to figure this out. And I think that was kind of the motto for both the live stream last Sunday and that roundtable event on Thursday was you just stay out of trouble. Try to interpret the laws the way they are. Your hemp is legal within the state if you're a 2014 state. And that's it. I mean, as far as the retail side goes, I would stay away from the hemp flower out of state. That would be my own advice. None of this is legal advice, but my advice is stay out of state. Just stay out of that market until we understand what the USDA is going to do or what these states are going to do, because I have a feeling that if it did get to a federal court level, they're going to follow the USDA. They're not going to follow the Farm Bill because now they're saying the USDA supersedes that USDA law defines the Farm Bill THC. So that's my interpretation of it. I got some notes over here, some other stuff. There are some codes. This is the code. We're getting this legal stuff. Is Title 7 under U.S. Code, Title 7, USC 1639, subsection 0 and subsection 1. That's where you can find, I don't know if you want to print it out and carry it around with you. And I can leave that whole subsection in the description when I'm done with the video. That's the subsection of the U.S. law that says hemp is defined by Delta 9 THC, and that level is 0.3. So that's where you can find that law. I don't know how good it's going to be if you get pulled over with hemp flower, but it may be good just to have because you show an officer some U.S. code, you might surprise them at least. Let's see, what else do I have here? So just check out your state regulations, guys. That's the other thing. Be familiar with your state. Be very familiar where you are. There's some states that are super lenient. There's some states that are not super lenient, like Idaho and South Dakota and Mississippi. And then you have the super legal states like Vermont and Massachusetts. So find where your state falls in line. And from my understanding, Virginia is being proactive in the hemp world. So that is good to hear on the Virginia side of things. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, so your state, that's one thing. So your state, if it wants to do a hemp program post 2020, if it has the 2014 Farm Bill, it has until 2020. So your state is currently submitting a plan to the USDA. So if you are going to talk to your state, now is the time. So you want to tell your state, hey, we want to be a Delta 9 state. We don't want to be this total THC. Your state can submit a plan that says, 0.3 Delta 9, 1% total. It'll be interesting if a state does that and to see if it gets rejected or not, because the USDA has to approve of that. So if they don't approve of it, then you know that they're probably not going to like when the farmers push back. And all the states are actually submitting now, and they should hear back relatively soon. It might even be before the comment period ends. So if a state actually does that, let me know. I'd love to see what the outcome is there. And I would keep an eye on a lot of those legal states up north and out west. One of those states might end up trying to do that to help their hemp farmers out a lot. And of course, their THC stuff, especially like in Vermont, if it's on property, there's not much the state's going to do about it anyways, because you can have an unlimited amount of dried product. So unless they actually tested your plant prior to harvest, you're fine anyways in a state like Vermont. So that's all I really have, guys, with this USDA stuff. Ask a question, let me know. And again, like I said, I'm not a legal advisor, so take this for what it is. This is just a farmer's interpretation of what's going on. And I really think just stay away from the out-of-state stuff unless it's CBD oil or a balm or something like that. And I think a lot of farmers are being pushed into that retail market anyway, because the promise of buying bulk flower just doesn't seem to be there. I don't see very many people saying they have sold hundreds and hundreds of pounds of flower. I don't see that. I see a lot of the small farmers being pushed into the retail. I know me personally, I really didn't want to be in retail, but it looks like that's the way I'm going. We're having a logo made, and we're going to start trying to move into that market to recoup some of the costs, because quite honestly, if we don't recoup some costs, we will not be growing in 2020. And the way that these laws are coming, it may behoove us just to get out of the market in general, but that's for another day. We'll figure that out as time goes on. But yeah, that's what I have. Let's see. Where do you think Virginia is heading as far as legalization of cannabis? Well, to not dive too much into politics, Virginia just turned, quote unquote, blue. Democrats have a tendency to be pro legalization. In my experience, that actually hasn't been the case. Vermont passed it under a Republican governor. Massachusetts passed it under a Republican governor. Maine passed it under a Republican governor. So I'm not going into the, Democrats lie just to get your vote, but I wouldn't put out too much hope for full legalization here in Virginia for at least 5 years. I think they haven't even figured out the medical stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. Virginia Assembly turned blue. The Senate did too, and the governorship. So it's a full blue state. But I wouldn't get your hopes up on it, guys. I really don't. Coming from some of the legal states up north, my home state of Connecticut is totally blue, and they still can't figure out how to legalize it recreationally. While you've got Vermont with a Republican governor that actually signed it into law. They passed it in the House and they signed it into law. Same thing with Maine. So again, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the politics of it. I think you have to look at the push and the need for it. And in Virginia, the Republican House and Senate, they decided to pass this right to defend. So we have medical cannabis in Virginia, but there's no dispensaries, and there's supposed to be. So it's a mess in Virginia when it comes to legalization. My prediction would be 5 years before we saw any movement on that. But that's a great question, and it'll be interesting to see how Virginia does once the state legislature changes, what their priorities are going to be. I haven't really heard anybody say that that's a priority. They didn't campaign on it. One of the, I think, General Assembly people from Portsmouth advocates for it every year up there. It always gets shot down. So I would assume that's probably going to happen again. I don't know if it'll carry enough votes in the House, but you never know. You never know. And they didn't win by any kind of super majority, so they probably will need some help to carry most bills through the House. Yeah, I mean, looking at the USDA laws as far as like the corporation can take over, if the USDA doesn't listen, then yeah. And actually, we heard from the girl that owned the lab saying that there was USC Berkeley could not. They removed the THC gene from the hemp plant, and it still produced THC. So it'll be interesting to see if Monsanto, now they may already have something, they don't tell people, they buy them out and then they patent it and then they sell it to you. So it'll be interesting to see if Monsanto comes out with a hemp plant this year, because you damn well know that they're going to be trying to get into this market with all the agricultural stuff they're in. Let's see, man. Yeah. CBD could possibly help. It helps with a lot of conditions. From the small amount of stuff that I have sold, most people say it helps with sleep. Most people have purchased it for a sleep aid and anti-anxiety. So I know that it works for that. And of course, if anybody knows the history of CBD, it all came from Charlotte's Web way back in the day, when that poor kid had, like, I don't know, it was like a lot of seizures every day. They just, they gave her CBD and it was like a miracle cure. And that was when CBD really started gaining ground recently. They've been able to isolate it since, I think the 40s or something, but that's what really kind of boarded it into where it is today, and why hemp became so popular, I think, was that instance of her having that huge success story that it was picked up by a lot of news channels, because that poor mom was just trying to help her kid, and it ended up being CBD, which back then was illegal except for California or Colorado, and they end up moving to a legal state. So check that out if you can find it. I remember hearing about it a long, long time ago, but most of these hemp plants are derived from Charlotte's Web in one shape, way, or form. I mean, they all came from that plant that was bred for CBD and not THC. And me personally, I'm a big CBD fan. THC, you can take it or leave it. Everything has a time and a place, and that was called college for the most part for me. But because I'm a Coast Guard captain, I have to also be careful with the CBD stuff too. So I only take it on occasion. I don't really take it very often. Actually, another note too, how much is CBD oil? It ranges in price. I've seen people pay upwards over $100 for CBD oil. The science behind it is the cannabinoid system. It reacts with your CB1 and CB2 systems. I'm not a anatomy scientist, but I do know that it works with a lot of neurons in the brain, and that's how it's so good at anti-anxiety and seizures and stuff like that. It goes directly to brain function. And a lot of the carrier oils like MCT oil also helps with brain function too. So you get a double combo there with MCT and CBD. Let's see. One of the other things I do know, well, we're on a subject about CBD. One of the things I do know is that a lot of people like the lotion for arthritis. So if anybody has arthritis that lotion seems to be doing really well, especially on joint pain, inflammation, stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of ways you can do CBD, and that's 100% legal, guys. Not to get off topic totally, but in the USDA laws, that's 100% legal. All those salves and balms and oils, for the most part, are tested well below the 0.3. And the great thing about the oils is you can dilute them. So if you know how you're making it and it does come in hot, you can dilute it with just more oil so that that number falls below that 0.3 total. And most of that stuff does. And a lot of it's made with isolate too, which then you don't have to worry about anything if it's made with isolate, and then you don't have to worry about any THC in it. Legalization grows in Virginia. Well, we don't have any legalization in Virginia. It's not. No, I haven't heard of any instances of law enforcement on properties with farmers in Virginia. I will say that so far in our state, which is a Bible Belt state, I have not heard of any law enforcement cracking down in Virginia. In fact, I've heard the opposite. I've heard of very embraced. And I mean, looking at it from my point of view as law enforcement, I think they would almost want to push for legalization at this point, because then they just don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't have to sit there and say, well, is this kid actually got CBD flower or is he got marijuana? I think if they just legalized it, I think law enforcement would be better off. I think you see that up in Massachusetts, where marijuana criminalization went down to like, I don't know, it's like 1.3% or something ridiculous like that. There's no arrests up in Massachusetts anymore. They just don't deal with it. And anybody who's been up there, it's actually kind of amusing. If you go to a dispensary, I did go to one, they actually have police officers directing traffic, and they love it. They absolutely love it. They have a blast with everybody. It's actually kind of fun. So the legal states, they know what's up. They know how to have some fun. But in Virginia, I'm kind of getting that same reception. Most people are really cool with it. In Massachusetts, they can grow 6 per person. Same thing with Vermont, and medically in Rhode Island. I'm not sure if Maine has it. I think Colorado's the same. But in Virginia, again, we cannot grow medicinal cannabis with THC. We don't have a plant limit as far as hemp goes. You can grow as many acres as you want, and they're pretty cool with it. It just has to be GPS located. Again, everything I have interacted with the state of Virginia has been positive. They have not had any issues whatsoever. The police officers, I have 2 state troopers that live down the street from me. I don't even know if they knew it was here. I know it's on file at the Gloucester County Sheriff's Office, but they never came and bothered me. They never cared. So I think they're just kind of like, whatever, let them grow it. You know, I don't really think Virginia's too worried about it until you have cured flower in your car and you get the wrong police officer, which is why I'm saying you might want to stay away from walking around with some hemp flower on you for now. But that's what I have for today. I'm going to check my notes one more time, guys, before I close out the video for today. If you guys have any more questions, now's a good time. Let's see. Got the code. Yeah, I think that's it, guys. Again, if you have questions later, I'll try to answer them. But this is probably going to be the last time I kind of talk about the USDA hemp laws. You have a good day yourself. I think now is the time to really kind of focus on what you want out of it and get behind it as a movement. I think you'll hear more talk about it as December comes closer. And as that deadline gets near, I think you've got a lot of lawyers working on formats. What are you doing with the hemp? So I'll get to that question in 1 second. So where the hell was I? Anyway, I'll just get to your question. So what do we do with our hemp? Well, right now, nothing. We have made some CBD oil from MCT oil. In fact, I'll have a video about CBD coconut oil coming out soon. I've been making it with my magic butter machine. I've been able to sell some on the side, which is perfectly legal. My permit allows me to sell the CBD oil to unregistered agents in Virginia, which for legal jumbo means as long as it's not flour, you can sell it. So I have sold some CBD oil, but that is really it. My goal, my original intention when I grew this stuff was to not be in retail. I did not want to be in retail at all. But the way the market is, it's super flooded. And if you want to make your money back or you want to make money in general, looks like you're going to have to enter the retail side. I am still trying to find avenues to sell in bulk because I just don't want to deal with retail. I want to just grow the plant. I focus on growing the plants. I have some really nice plants, and when I cut them down and I trim them out, that's it. That's the last time I want to see them. I want them out of here, but that doesn't seem to be the case, unfortunately. So, we will end up hitting the retail market at some point. You can look for that stuff. Uh, yeah, we are heading. We have a good direction, but it's a lot of legalities, a lot of navigating, and a kind of. I saw another hemp farmer kind of do a rant on it. It's definitely a black cloud over the hemp industry right now. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people have lost a lot, or all of a sudden they sunk life savings into growing hemp, and with these laws, you definitely have to worry a little bit. So I feel for those people. That's one of the biggest reasons why I did a test plot this year. Other than finding genetics, it was I just did not trust the legality behind hemp. It almost seemed too good to be true, and unfortunately, that seems to be coming true, which is unfortunate. But we can push back, so no, not all hope is lost here with that stuff. I forget what I was talking about before, but if you guys remind me before we got into what we were doing with the hemp plants. Um, but like I said, that's really it. And if you guys have any questions later on, I would be glad to answer them. But I just don't see me talking about the USDA much anymore until I have like a letter that I can maybe share with everybody that you could submit on behalf of yourself as public comment to the USDA to have that unified voice, so to speak. And I plan on having one of those, but I don't plan on having it until December. November's already flying by. What's today? It's already the 10th. So, it'll be Thanksgiving before you know it. I really think after the Thanksgiving holiday, you'll see a lot of people starting to submit then. And you'll probably see a lot of people submit like the day before the 30th, because it's going to take a while for everybody to gather their thoughts and submit. But I really do anticipate a lot of people doing it. And if you don't grow hemp, or you love this channel, or you love CBD products, you can submit a comment too. It's not just for growers. And I want to make that clear. This is public comment. This is anybody in the United States of America that loves CBD products. You can submit it. So that's the great thing. It's called the bait and switch as far as legalities being too good to be true. Yeah, that's I addressed it in that video that a lot of people liked about my take on the USDA, and the lawyer that I talked to on Thursday kind of addressed that too. It was almost too good to be true, and I don't think they had any idea what they legalized when they legalized it in the 2018 Farm Bill. The few people that were involved with the 2014 Farm Bill, like Mitch McConnell, I'm sure Mitch McConnell knew about CBD hemp flower. It would boggle my mind if that man did not know what the hell he was getting into, because he's been to Kentucky. He's definitely given Kentucky the upper hand with a lot of this hemp stuff. So for them to deny that he had any idea that CBD hemp flower was going to be a thing would be, and now he hasn't done that, but it would be very bizarre if that was the case. I think as a whole, you had a big pushback from law enforcement. And I think in that video I talked about, I think they want push to fiber and to food and to like hemp oil, which is completely different than CBD oil. Hemp oil is like a fatty acid oil. It's an omega high oil. It's not no CBD in it. So that, yeah, the legalization was too good to be true, and I think they're definitely taking a walk back. But if you push back hard enough, they're not going to be able to walk it back. We're coming into a 2020 election year. You have people that want to be reelected, including Mitch McConnell. He is in an election year, and if he wants to be reelected by his home state of Kentucky, is better off not pissing on his farmers, because I can guarantee you most of Kentucky does not have hemp that is below 0.3 total THC. So he should be a little scared, and he should be listening. So that's another avenue too. Is we have elections here in the U.S., and elections have consequences. And if that is the case, you can definitely see a farmer pushback for those that grew hemp and are getting the screw. So definitely look for the USDA and our senators to listen, because a lot of them are going to end up in an election campaign. So it was a bait and switch, but I don't know if they can switch it now that there's an actual market. And I'll touch on that too. One of the things that the AG policy guys for our senators here in Virginia, which are both Democrats, they, from my understanding, I wasn't at the meeting, but their eyebrows kind of raised when you say, oh, well, they're just going to import it from Canada. So using that leverage too, saying, well, the market's here, whether we grow it or not, it's going to come into the United States. So I think that's another way to get to some senators too, is like, well, you're just shipping out jobs and business. And if the economy tanks in your state, but it's doing well in other states, you're not going to win re-election. So really an interesting take on that is, let's see, grow THC plants with CBD kind of new. Yeah. I mean, if you told me hemp 5 years ago, I would have never assumed CBD. Hemp fiber, hemp rope, hemp seeds for food, hemp heart, stuff like that. But yeah, the CBD thing is new, and I think a lot of legislators are old, and they thought rope and they thought clothes. So when you had this CBD hemp flower popping up, you probably scared some of them, because you have the reefer madness thing going on since the 40s. So which is just insane to me that plant, they can outlaw a plant, but that's a topic for a whole nother day. But yeah, I think we'll close out unless anybody else has questions, guys. I really do appreciate all the questions. It definitely opens up more dialogue. And like I said, I'll kind of be quiet on the USDA from here on out until I get something solid that I can submit. And again, before I close out the video, I want to remind everybody, you don't have to grow it to submit a form for public comment. That is your right. They're giving you that right. So make sure you exercise it. Make sure you use it. It'll be a big deal, because if you like lesser expensive CBD products, definitely advocate, because if you're shipping everything from Canada, you can bet you it's going to be more expensive. Oh, what do I think about CBG? Thanks for that question, Benny. That's a great question. I don't know if I talked about it in any of my videos this summer, but I heard rumblings of CBG probably back in April when I first got my permit. Apparently the rumbling was that it killed some cancer cells in a lab test, and so CBG got all of a sudden it's become a forefront. I think a couple people were sitting on some CBG genetics. They heard that kind of come out, and I think you're going to see a large CBG explosion. If it's in 2020, maybe I'll definitely see a more production in 2020. But I think CBG's year is going to be in 2021. I think when the genetics really start becoming readily available. Yeah, I've heard it's going to be the hot cannabinoid for next season, because I'll tell you right now, I hear, and this is just rumor because I haven't seen a COA to prove this yet, that CBG varieties do come in under 0.3 total THC. Now, whether that's true or not, that's yet to be seen. I haven't seen the receipts, so to speak, to prove that, but it'll be interesting. I'm definitely looking for CBG varieties. I want to get some CBG on the farm to grow it. I want to try it. I think you can't go wrong. So I definitely think CBG is going to be the next wave. I've heard people say that, CBD was the kale of 2019, which is true. I remember, anybody remembers the kale craze back in, what was that, 2015 or something? Um, CBG will definitely run its course. It'll have a bubble, just like CBD, but I think CBG is just in that point where it's just going to start. A few people have it this year. It's hard to come by right now, and if it does get bought up and people really start liking it, you will see more farmers grow it. All right, sweet. I'll have to look him up on Instagram, and check it out. I definitely want CBG genetics. That main priority for this winter is to locate CBG. I have CBD genetics that I like. I have 3 varieties, maybe 4, that I'm going to keep here on the farm. I'm fine with them. They don't have to be like some of these fancy names like Hawaiian Haze or Silver or Suver, whatever they call it, or Sour Space Candy. I'm fine with Cherry Wine and Biox and Auto Sweeten and Cherry Blossom. I don't need all these crazy names. But I'll look at him on Instagram for some CBG, because that's a priority. Let's see. Mitch McConnell will not help you. He's marching to the orders. Well, yes and no. Yeah, of course he needs funding for his campaign, but he's not going to get reelected if he pissed off half the state, because there's a lot of hemp farmers in Kentucky. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It will. It'll be interesting to see. And I think he might have some stiff competition this go around. So, again, I'm not playing politics on this. I'm not getting into that fray, but they're going to have to run on something. And if he doesn't have the farmers as a Republican, farmers are a big base for them. So it'll be interesting to see. But thanks for that question on CBG, Benny. I think that's something I'm actually going to probably start talking about in some of my winter videos as I go hunting for those genetics, because if the rumor is true that those genetics can find themselves under 0.3 THC total, they're going to become very, very popular. And I think you're going to see probably a entire shift from farmers. If that catches fire and that is true, you're going to see a shift in farmers move over to CBG and forget CBD, which is good and bad, because you're going to leave the CBD market wide open to competitors like Canada or Mexico, and then the United States will kind of shift to a CBG. It's really going to depend where the law allows farmers to go. You'd love to be able to grow both varieties, but if there's going to be less risk in CBG, you can bet that farmers are going to go with CBG. They're not going to go with CBD if they know that the risk is way greater of going hot. So you may see a tremendous shift depending on if these rumors are true about CBG not having any THC in it. So I'm very curious to see that. And if you do know somebody who has good CBG genetics, let me know. You can always email me at yorkrivercannabis@gmail.com. And I usually respond pretty quick with that. Any other questions, comments, guys, before we close out today? All right, looks like we're good. Everybody's been satisfied with their questions, and it opened up some really good dialogue. The CBG questions actually definitely my favorite, because I'm really interested in that. So I've been interested in that for a while. In fact, I spent most of the summer hunting for those genetics, and I could not find them. So if you know somebody that has them, let me know. But that's it for today's video, guys. No more questions pop up here in the next couple minutes, but I'm going to close out by saying thank you to all you guys that showed up today. And for those of you that tune in later, thank you for watching. Thank you, everybody who subscribed. I'm assuming most of you guys are subscribers, and we recently just hit the 1,000 mark, which is huge. So thank you for that, guys. I really do appreciate you guys showing up. And you can always hit me up on Instagram and Facebook. I'll leave those links in the description, but you can always find me on there and direct message to get in touch with me. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.